Alright, it's about time that I knock this off my to-do list. I've tried to record this video numerous times. In fact, I've done full recordings of this video a couple times, and it just hasn't felt right. Video games are really hard to talk about, especially in this format. This format just does not allow for me to really iron out my thoughts. And video games are hard for me to talk about because, one, I'm not very good at video games. Anyone who's seen my streams would know that. And I really have to be engaged in a game and actively playing it for me to really iron out my thoughts on an individual game. And there's a lot to talk about with video games and mechanics and graphics and how they work and what the stories are, if they even have stories. Some of these games don't have stories and are therefore really hard for me to talk about since I, as a critic, as a content creator, I specialize in characterization analysis. But I've been saying that I'd do this video eventually for a long time now, and it's just time to get it over with. This is my top 30 favorite video games. Number 30 is Resident Evil 4. This is, of course, the fourth mainline game in the Resident Evil series. It came out in 2005, originally for GameCube, though I played it on PS2 mostly. It's a really good, solid survival horror game. It's got a great inventory system. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty campy, and it strikes that perfect balance between campy and being legitimately scary that I really enjoy. I really enjoy the macabre. I really enjoy dark senses of humor. I love me some Vincent Price, and this game, more than any of the other Resident Evil games, really kind of captures that feel for me. Number 29 is Super Street Fighter 2. I don't know how to talk about this game. This is just a fighting game that I played a lot as a kid and got a lot of time with, and it's one that I still go back to sometimes. I cannot tell you what the plot is. I don't know. I don't even really believe it has a plot. It has characters, and the characters have motivations. Plot? No, not really. It's just a fun 2D fighting game, and it's the ultimate 2D fighting game. Number 28 is Bloodborne. This is the only Souls game on the list, and it's the one that I've played the most. I love the aesthetic. I love the level design. I love the creature designs. I love the controls, at least as far as, what you can do and what your options are. And I love the customization. I love that this is just a good, old-fashioned, dungeon-crawling RPG. I don't care much for the lore. The characters are basically just there for the action. And it is oftentimes, I think, hard for the wrong reasons. It's hard because it just stacks the deck. I don't think that is a fair way to approach difficulty, and it's why I have a hard time getting into all the FromSoft games. But Bloodborne is a standout amongst those, mostly because of its aesthetics. Number 27 is Ninja Gaiden. This is what I mean when I talk about difficult for the right reasons. This is also a very hard game and one that I've never actually managed to beat. But it is fun as hell. It holds up very well graphically. The voice acting is pretty decent. The soundtrack is pretty good. And the controls are actually smooth as butter. They don't have delays in them. They don't have jank. It's all ironed out. And because all the controls are actually ironed out, when you die, and you will die a lot in this game, it's always your fault, and it is the kind of failure that can later breed success if you give it enough time. Number 26 is Little Big Planet 2. I have a very soft spot for Little Big Planet, and I have a soft spot for any game that allows the players to actively be creative. And Little Big Planet was the first series to really make that the point. Yes, there is a story mode with levels created by the developers, but overall this is actually just a toy box for other people to make their levels and for you to play those levels online. The reason why Little Big Planet 2 is on this list and not any of the other ones is because Little Big Planet 3 was kind of janky. It was not made by the same people, and so there were a lot of glitches and problems with it. Meanwhile, the first game is just inferior. Like, Little Big Planet 2 is everything Little Big Planet had, but more and better. Number 25 is Medal of Honor. The original is my personal favorite. This is, to me, what GoldenEye 64 was to a lot of other people my age. And this is the progenitor of the World War II shooter. It's got all the same cool stuff that GoldenEye had. GoldenEye, of course, did all of this stuff first. And Medal of Honor didn't necessarily do any of it better. But it's the one that means the most to me as someone who grew up playing this game and not GoldenEye. I didn't play GoldenEye until much later, and so it just didn't have the same impact on me. Number 24 is Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall. Skyrim might be a lot more fun to play. Oblivion is also probably a lot more fun to play. But I have way more respect for Daggerfall, and I really wanted to give it a shout out. Anyone who knows Elder Scrolls and has experienced the series in full knows all of its merits, but for those of you who are uninitiated, Arena was a jankety mess. The first Elder Scrolls game, which was called Arena, was a jankety-ass mess. Daggerfall polished a lot of that stuff out and added a lot of different kinds of content. There has not been an RPG deeper than Daggerfall. Ever. Morrowind took away a lot of the content. Took away a lot of the mechanics. Oblivion added a few of those mechanics and options back, and Skyrim took them away again. Yes, Daggerfall doesn't hold up that well mechanically. It is not a fun game to play if you don't know what you're doing. It's very, very difficult. It might be the most difficult game on this list. But the amount of respect I have for it and how deep it goes and how hard it goes and how massive the world is, I had to have it on this list. Number 23 is Splinter Cell Chaos Theory. Ask me tomorrow and I might have Pandora tomorrow on this list instead. I have a lot of respect for the stealth genre. The stealth genre is one that I am very bad at, but it has produced some very deep and compelling games, Splinter Cell not least among them. Number 22 is Psychonauts. This is the 2005 game by Double Fine. It's my favorite 3D platformer, and it's a lot of fun, and I look forward to streaming it eventually someday, and I'll get really in-depth with my analysis there. But this game is a lot of fun, it's hilarious, the level design is ingenious, the concept is ingenious, it is good from beginning to end. There is no bad level in this game. They're all masterpieces, with maybe one or two of them being not as much of a masterpiece. But they're all still really good levels, which is more than I could say about most games that exist. Number 21 is Hitman 2, I guess. A lot of the Hitman games are really even for me, and so it was really hard actually picking one. Hitman 2 is the first one I played, and so it's the one that I think set the standard. But a couple of the later ones did up the ante and smooth out the controls a bit more and had more depth and more level variety and more options. Options is a big thing for me, especially when it comes to stealth games. I like having the ability to choose my own path. That is something I value as a gamer. So yeah, Hitman 2, the original Hitman 2, is a game that, it might not be the best Hitman game, but it's my personal favorite. It's the one that I have gotten the most enjoyment out of. And speaking of just games that I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of, number 20 is Star Wars Battlefront 2, another 2005 game. This is just a multiplayer romp. It is a party game, first and foremost. And it's one that I've bought multiple times on multiple systems, and I've gotten hundreds of hours clocked in on it on everything that I've played it on. It might very well be the single game I have played the most, though I think there's some competition for that that you'll also see on this list. And continuing the theme with Star Wars, number 19 is Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, the final of the Jedi Knight games. But this is the one, it probably has the weakest story of the Jedi Knight games, but it's got the best combat. I love the way that they handle the lightsaber combat in this game in particular, and I like the way that they handle the Force as well. This is a game that I wish more developers would look at when creating Star Wars games. I liked Jedi Fallen Order just fine. I actually liked it a lot and gave it a very glowing recommendation when it came out. But it doesn't feel as good to chop away at stormtroopers in that game as it does chopping away at stormtroopers in Dark Jedi in this game. Number 18 is Luigi's Mansion. I just also have a very soft spot for this game. It's baby's first survival horror featuring Mario characters. What is there not to like? I love the organic level design. Level design is another big thing for me. Level design is the only reason why Bloodborne is as high as it is. Level design is a very important thing for me, and Luigi's Mansion has some of the best level design I've ever seen. Certainly the best level design in the wider umbrella of Mario and Mario adjacent franchises. And it's cute and fun, and Luigi's got his little shimmy. Number 17 is Castlevania. I'm gonna pick 4. I know a lot of people, particularly my age, would be like, oh yeah, Symphony of the Night, Game of the Year, all years. Symphony of the Night is really, really good. It's great. It's fantastic. If I wasn't doing this sort of one game per franchise rule, it would also make my list. I prefer Castlevania games that prefer whips. It's as simple as that. Number 16 is Tekken 3. I've talked about this game enough to where I should probably find a way to get it on this computer so I can stream it. It's the fighting game I played the most as a kid, for sure. I had this for a very long time, and I played as all the characters. I beat the story mode with all the characters. So it's the one that I have the most emotional connection to. And the way it blended 3D assets with the sort of Street Fighter 2D gameplay is really ingenious, and one that I've seen a lot of games try to copy, but I can't think of any of them that do it as well as Tekken has. And Tekken continues to do so. It kind of declined with Tekken 4, 5, and 6, but Tekken 7 was a great return to form. Anyway, number 15 is Super Mario World. This is why when I was talking about like the franchise rule a couple slots ago, I was like the sorta kinda, because yes, I have Luigi's Mansion on this list, but Luigi's Mansion is kind of its own franchise. It's not in the same franchise as the Mario platformer games, and so Super Mario World is my Mario rep. It's my favorite Mario game, it's got my favorite soundtrack, it's got some of my favorite worlds, it's got Yoshi, and Yoshi is my favorite Mario character. So, yeah, like, it's Mario, he's saving Princess Peach from Bowser, and it's just a lot of fun. And I think Mario kind of peaked with this game. At least 2D Mario peaked with this game, because every 2D Mario game that has come out since has just been rehashing all the same ideas from Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, 3, and Super Mario World. Number 14 is Thief 2, The Metal Age. This is another game that I haven't actually beaten. I have watched playthroughs of it a couple times, and I do dig Thief. I'm not good at it. I don't think I could ever beat this game on my own without a walkthrough and a guide. Again, I'm just not that good at video games, and I'm especially not good at stealth games. But what Thief gets right that no other stealth franchise does is audio. The audio in the first three stealth games is beyond anything that modern games have. Like, you go to Thief 4 or Dishonored, or what are some other stealth games that come out? Even the modern Hitman games, which are also fantastic, by the way. Thief 2 was kind of peak Thief. Thief, the Dark Project, the first one, was a little all over the place. They didn't really know what they wanted this game to be and what they wanted the series to be. With Thief 2, they decided, yes, we are a thief sim. We are focusing entirely on stealth and all that entails, and we're also going to have a pretty cool steampunk story about a cult of machinists. Moving on, number 13 is God of War 3, the exact opposite of Thief 2, whereas Thief 2 is smart, deep, compelling, nuanced, with a lot of gameplay mechanic and a lot of gameplay depth. God of War 3 is a mindless button masher with an okay story. It gets good at parts, but this is just a fun action romp that's just visceral and cathartic to play. And it also looks amazing. It holds up very well for a game that came out over 10 years ago. Number 12 is Super Smash Bros. Melee. Maybe Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I haven't really decided which of those two I like more yet. Melee is the one that I've played the most. That was also the first Smash Bros. Game I played. And so it's the one that sticks in my mind the most and I have the most memories with. Whereas Ultimate, I've only played that a little bit, just in the last year. But yeah, it's all of your favorite Nintendo characters, and it's just a fun action romp party game. Like, it's a party game first and foremost. It doesn't really have a plot. The only game that actually has a plot in this franchise is Brawl, which is also my least favorite of the Smash Bros. Games. It's got the most jank in it. And it's just fun. Like, this is why talking about this and doing this list and doing this video is so hard. Like, how do I talk about the merits of Super Smash Bros? How do people do this? How do people do this for a living? Freaking have a palate cleanser after this. Well, here's a palate cleanser. Number 11 is Red Dead Redemption, which I think has the best plot of any of these games. Overall. Overall, the best plot. It's got some gameplay jank as well, but it's Rockstar, and that's kind of par for the course for them. I'm not that big of a fan of GTA. I was never a big fan of GTA. It's why I actually came to the Red Dead Redemption party a little late. It was already, this game was already like 3 or 4 years old before I played it. But this and its sequel are what you get when Rockstar actually take the game development cycle seriously. Red Dead Redemption 2 is just as good. It's better in a lot of ways and not as good in other ways. Red Dead Redemption, I feel like, just has a more satisfying story. And that makes sense. This is the story they wanted to tell first. Red Dead Redemption 2 was like, okay, now that we have this, let's come up with another story for these characters. Like, if Red Dead Redemption 2 was going to ever be a better story, that's probably the story they would have told for the first game, and they would have saved the story for the sequel. Like, it's just one of those things. And the controls in Red Dead Redemption are a lot more smooth, but Red Dead Redemption 2, they're not as smooth on purpose, and it's a purpose that I actually have a lot of respect for. Anyway, I don't really have to justify why Red Dead Redemption is on this list and Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't. I just have to justify why Red Dead Redemption is this high on the list. It's one of my favorite open world games. It's the best Western game, with the only real competition being its own sequel. It's got my favorite lead character in any Western game. One of my favorite characters in any game, at least playable characters. If I were to make a list of my top 10 favorite playable characters, he maybe topped the list there too. And that's why this game is so much higher than any of the other games I've talked about and any of the games that didn't make this list. Number 10, we're really getting into the heavy hitters now. Number 10 is Silent Hill 2. Perfection. Survival horror perfection, but perfection nonetheless. Survival horror has a lot of really interesting issues inherent in the genre, and that could be the subject of its own 10 to 20 minute video, and I've seen people make that very same video, so you don't need my word for it. There are videos out there that talk about the problems with making a horror game, but this is a game that had a vision. It had a purpose. It had ideas, and it did everything it possibly could to use the video game medium to flesh those ideas out. If I was talking about the games I respect the most, this would be in my top 5. But because there also has to be some level of entertainment there, it barely cracks my top 10. It's a fun game. Fun might not be the right word for horror games. It's engaging. It's an engaging game. It is absolutely immersive. Again, all of these platitudes are why it's even in my top 10, whereas Resident Evil 4, which is also a standout within the survival horror genre, barely made my top 30. There's a lot of really good reason why Silent Hill 2 is even in my top 10. I feel like I have to try to come up with an excuse to justify it not being in my top 5. It's that good. Number 9 is a toy box. It's Minecraft. The perfect toy box. A game so perfect that it will never ever need a sequel. Just more updates, giving you more things to play around with, and more mechanics introduced in those things that it introduces for the sole purpose of you playing around with them. There's no story in Minecraft. It's a story that you make your own. It is your story. It is the story about how you shape the world using a handful of very simple game mechanics. It's kind of perfect in that way. It's perfect in the sense that everyone can find some level of engagement, some level of entertainment with Minecraft, but it is absolutely imperfect in that is the only thing it does. It is imperfect in how perfect it is. It's also a game that is very hard to actually talk about and say anything substantial with. Number 8 is Super Metroid. Metroid Dread might also make this spot, but they're kind of equivalent to each other. Metroid Dread is more modern, and so it's got the slicker controls, better graphics, better sound design, a better music score most of the time, better cinematics, and that it actually has cinematics. Story-wise, they're about even, I would say. And it's just that Super Metroid did it all first. There's nothing great about Metroid Dread that you can't also say for Super Metroid, a game that came out almost 20 years earlier. And it holds up to this day. It's gorgeous for a Super Nintendo game. It's slick as hell for a Super Nintendo game. It's got all these other aesthetic platitudes I could throw at it for a Super Nintendo game. And gameplay-wise, it's still really fun to play, and really interesting, and really awesome. And just, there's a reason why this is kind of the be-all, end-all of Metroid. It's gonna be really hard for a game that actually fully surpasses it in every way. Metroid Prime has a lot of its own merits, but it also has a lot of its own issues. Metroid Dread, basically perfect. I can't think of a single flaw in it, but I also can't think of a flaw in Super Metroid. They're both perfect for what they are games. The only reason why neither is number 1 is because the story is thin. That's really the only reason why Super Metroid isn't number 1, because the story is just that thin. That is actually a common theme with this bottom half of the top 10, because number 7 is Mega Man X. Another game that is mechanically perfect and beautiful for a Super Nintendo game. It has a great soundtrack for a Super Nintendo game, and actually just has a great soundtrack overall. Like, the soundtrack is probably what puts this above Super Metroid more than anything else. And yeah, it's a game that just all the merits speak for themselves. It's just a blast to play. I love that it just took the Mega Man formula and made it better, bigger, better, more awesome. And then the sequels kind of phoned it in a little bit, and it was kind of all downhill from there. But Mega Man X and some of the older Mega Man games are also equivalent, I would say, overall. Mega Man X is just the one that I have the most experience and have had the most fun with. Number 6 is Donkey Kong Country 2, another game that is mechanically perfect and good. And every single thing I said about Mega Man X and Super Metroid, I can also say about Donkey Kong Country 2. And I'd say it looks better than those games. I love the way it uses its 2D sprites. I wish games would go back to doing that, because it was a really cool, interesting look that just we don't get anymore. Like, we're what, like 10 years deep into pixel art being a big thing on the indie scene? Why can't we get, like, the actual hand-drawn animated sprites? Yes, we had Cuphead. Cuphead kicked ass. Donkey Kong Country 2 also kicked ass, and also came out, like, 20 years earlier. Number 5 is System Shock. Probably the game I have the most reverence for. It is the chairman of my gaming pantheon. I just haven't gotten around to playing it a whole lot. This is a game that might actually make my number 1 spot when I give it more time to actually gestate in my mind. Now, as I play it more, as I explore more of it, but I can't see it going lower than my top 5, so that's where it's at. So I'm giving all the other games above this the benefit of the doubt. I will say that System Shock is better than System Shock 2 by a wide margin, because System Shock 2 is an RPG and falls into all the same pitfalls as all those other RPGs that value numbers and stats over actual game mechanics and player choice. System Shock, while having some light, what we would consider light RPG elements nowadays, is an adventure game first and foremost. And it's also very interesting, well written. I love games that do the audio log thing. Like, System Shock paved the way for my absolute favorite kind of game, which people call the immersive sim, but immersive sim is kind of a meaningless term, because all games are in some way a simulation, and any good game is immersive, so immersive sim is just a more pretentious way of saying good game. I would actually use the term shock style for this sort of game, and that also helps differentiate it from other first-person adventure games like the Dark Project or, well, the next thing on my list. Number 4 is Deus Ex. I'm picking Mankind Divided. Fuck you, fight me. The original Deus Ex is a masterpiece, I'm sure. I've seen playthroughs of it. I haven't ever been able to actually get it to run on my computer, so I don't feel like it's fair to actually judge that game, neither objectively or subjectively, because I haven't had a proper feel for it. So the competition is actually between Human Revolution, Mankind Divided, and oh shit, we lost Deus Ex for a bunch of Marvel tie-ins. Anyway, Human Revolution probably has the better story, and it's got the better style overall with the lighting. Like, the sepia lighting in Human Revolution is better than the flat lighting of Mankind Divided. That is the only area in which Human Revolution is superior. Mankind Divided has better controls, it has better graphics, obviously, as a game that came out 5 years later. It's got better side plots, it's got better hub world mechanics. Not open world, it's not an open world game, but it does give you a lot of nooks and crannies you can explore within the various hubs. And this game, and this franchise overall's approach to player choice is the best thing in this entire medium. It's not just the best game for this, it's the best franchise in this entire medium when it comes to that single aspect of video games. Which, again, player choice is something that I highly value. I think the saying goes that in System Shock 2, there is no such thing as a right choice, but in Deus Ex, there's no such thing as a wrong choice. I'll take the game where there's no such thing as a wrong choice over the System Shock 2 approach. Alright, now we're getting into the real heavy hitters, for me, personally. Number 3 is Batman Arkham City. This has what might be my second or third favorite story. Like, if I was just basing this off their campaigns, their story modes, whatever they call them, Arkham City would probably be number 2 or 3. It's also very cathartic and kick-ass in all the same ways that a lot of these action games are. And it's also really gorgeous. It holds up very well for a game that came out over 10 years ago. It's got a stellar voice cast and a great soundtrack, and it's just the ultimate Batman game, and I like Batman, or at least I used to. And Arkham City is one of those games where I didn't just 100% complete it, I 100% completed it multiple times. That's how much fun I had, even with its side content and bitch work. To put that into perspective, there's a lot of open world games that I really like that I haven't bothered 100% completing. Alright, the second spot goes to Zelda. Obviously, I will hold to my initial appraisal that Link to the Past is objectively the best of the games. Wind Waker has my favorite story and my favorite gimmick with the sailing. Breath of the Wild has the best open world exploration and best use of like player choice and just freeform exploration, not just within the Zelda franchise, probably within gaming as a medium. And Link to the Past is just the foundation that everything was built on. Much like Super Metroid, it's gonna be really hard to come up with a game that objectively like just outdoes Link to the Past in every single way, because it's kinda perfect, and perfect things are very boring to talk about, actually. And number 1, my favorite game, and it has been my favorite game from the first time I laid eyes on it. It is Bioshock. Yes, this is the poor man's System Shock. Yes, this dumbs down a lot of shit that System Shock had. Yes, the lack of an inventory system leaves a lot to be desired. Yes, that part where you're escorting the little sister, a little obnoxious. Yes, Frank Fontaine, kind of a wasted villain. Yes, that final boss kinda sucked. No, this does not change the fact that this is the game that has engaged me the most. I love the world. I love its approach to environmental storytelling. I think with its Art Deco design and its underwater setting and the way it handles its characters and the way it really makes you want to get those audio logs. Like, System Shock had great audio logs, but at the end of the day, it was just a space station, and these were just people that worked at a space station. Rapture feels more alive than any other fictional setting that has ever been introduced in this medium. Which is ironic, because the city is dead and decaying and on life support and just going down the shitter. But it feels lived in, it feels fleshed out, it feels alive in a way most other video game worlds just don't even attempt. And games like System Shock just didn't have the technology to try to attempt it. What I'm saying is that the System Shock remake is going to be my new number 1 favorite game when it comes out. But until then, Bioshock is the crowning jewel of the video game medium for me. It's my favorite game. As someone who sucks at video games, but does value player choice and immersion and good storytelling, Bioshock just does it all. So despite its faults and whatever grievances you might have that I didn't get bothered by, this is still just my number 1 favorite game. So what are some of your favorite games? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Mediocrity4. Thanks for watching.